Hello, and welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we teach you how to make great meals in an ordinary, everyday kitchen. Today we're tackling a big one. We're tackling how to roast a turkey. And I know this year is very special, being 2020. There's going to be a lot of families which unfortunately aren't able to get together at Grandma's house. So this year what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you how to cook a turkey for your own family. And it's not as hard as you might think. People get a little bit intimidated by it because it's a bigger meal and it takes a little bit longer to prepare. So first thing you want to know is how many people are going to be there for dinner and what time do you want to have dinner. And that might mean, where there's a break between the football games, if there even is, or just what's the most opportune time. And then you kind of work backwards from that, depending on the size of your turkey. Today, I have a 9-pound or a 4.4 kilogram turkey. This is a Canada Grade A turkey. There's no basting or anything in this. It's just a plain turkey. Lots of options you can have with turkeys. Sometimes you'll see ones that say utility grade. Those turkeys are absolutely fine. They're just there's some cosmetic things that they might be missing a wing or have a little tear in the skin, but they're still perfectly fine to eat. You can also get turkeys that are basted. There's a sort of name brand, the Butterball ones, which have actual canola oil injected into them to help with the moisture. Or there's ones that are butter basted that have butter infused in them. And all of those, they all have their reasons that you would go with that particular type of turkey. Turkeys themselves are different than chickens because they have less natural fat. Chickens will be much juicier to start with. So with a turkey, it's very important that we cook it in such a way that we retain as much of the natural juices as you can. And that's why we will be adding a lot of moisture, and we're also going to be adding some butter to this one ourselves. So we're going to start off, as with any cooking, you're going to start with washing your hands. And it's doubly important when you're dealing with poultry that you wash your hands not just before you handle it, but also after you've been handling it. So we're just going to move over to the sink, wash up, and then open up our turkey. Okay, so there's our turkey, and you make sure that it is thawed out. It does come, they all come wrapped in these lovely heavy plastic bags. So we put it in the sink to open it because there is going to be certain amount of moisture that comes out when we open it up. And they are surprisingly heavy and cumbersome at this point, even a small one like this. So there's our beautiful turkey, and it is quite wet inside. And then there's what's called the giblets. So we'll get to dealing with the giblets shortly. And also, if we look inside, there should be a bit of a neck, maybe not. So once we've got everything out of it, then we're just going to take some cold water and rinse it out. And both ends. This is the head here. You can tell by the wings here. Got the breast at the front. And our tail down at the back here. So now we shake off the excess and put it over to the cutting board where we're going to dry it off just a little bit. All right, so now that we've washed off our turkey, we're going to pat it dry, which is something that you want to do with any kind of meat. It does help it to brown a little bit better if you don't have any excess moisture on this. And you also want to have a look at the turkey and make sure that there's no little extra feathers or things like that might have snuck past all the mechanical plucking that they do. And have a look at both sides of the turkey. Make sure that there's nothing that needs fixing before you get ready to roast it. And in today's video, like I say, we're not going to be stuffing this turkey. When you stuff a turkey, what it's doing is it's adding extra flavor to it, and we'll be able to make the stuffing separate from the turkey, and I'll be showing you how to do that in a future episode. The other thing that stuffing the turkey does is it does add at least an extra half an hour to your cooking time. But you still want to do something that's going to give you extra flavor in your turkey. So that's why today we have these beautiful herbs that we just picked out of the garden just a few minutes ago. There is an episode where I take you on a little tour of my herb garden, so you know what to expect here. We start off with fresh sage, and all of these herbs, I'm just going to put them in whole, but I am going to kind of crunch them up a little bit before I do that, just to bruise the leaves. And what that's going to do is it's going to release some more of the oils. So we're going to just pop it in the, looks like I've got a little bit more moisture to take off of there. See how that just pooled in the bottom there? And that's extra steam that would help with the cooking, I guess, but I don't think we want that in there. So we're going to just put the sage in there. Then we have thyme. Now, if I was using this thyme in a stew or something, I would strip it off of the stems, because it can just go whole in the turkey, and then we'll take it out whole after it's finished cooking. Pop that in there. And then we have rosemary. And for folks that are from the Ottawa Valley, which is where Eganville is, people here love to put what's called summer savory in their turkey. And they're just amazed that I don't do that. But rosemary is of the same family as summer savory, so it's going to have a similar kind of flavor to it. So we're going to pop that in there. And really, when you think about the size of this turkey, there wouldn't be very much room for a lot of stuffing in there anyway, because these herbs seem to take up most of that space. Then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take an onion and just put that, I'm just going to peel it and put it in whole. Nothing too fancy about that. Cut it in half because it's easier to peel then. But that's, again, adding a little bit of extra flavor in there. That in. And this is a Velveeta onion, not an oven, onion, which is a sweeter kind of an onion, and any cooking onion will do for this. Then we're ready to just put it all together. Now, this is the tail section, which is basically just a lot of fat. So most people, or a lot of people, will cut it off. What I like to do is to just use that to hold the legs in place. Just like that. So I don't have to be worrying about tying it up, and that holds it together quite nicely. So there's our turkey ready to go in the pan, but then we have to get the pan ready. So what I have here is a roasting pan. I've already oiled it or lubricated it, as my new buzzword is. The roaster that I prefer to use is one like this that's open. Some people use one with a big lid on it, but I find that steams the turkey a little bit more than actually roasting it. This roaster has ridges on it to hold the turkey up just a little bit out of the moisture. We are going to be adding a fair bit of moisture to this, but this will hold things up a little bit. If you have a perfectly flat bottom pan, add a layer of whole carrots and onions or potatoes or something on the bottom to hold your bird up just a little bit out of the juice. All right, so our pan has ridges in the bottom to help hold that up. If your pan is flat bottomed, just put a layer of roughly cut carrots, potatoes, onions, something in the bottom that your turkey can rest on. If you don't have a roasting pan, it's quite all right to go to the dollar store and get a disposable roasting pan. For years, that's what I used, and they're way easier to clean. All you have to do is fold them up and put them in the garbage. If you do use a disposable one, just be very sure that before you put it in the oven, you set it on a cookie sheet or something that's going to support it, because when you go to take that turkey out, you don't want it folding up well filled with hot juices on you. You need some support underneath it. So even though I have this great roasting pan, I'm going to add to that by using some parchment paper. Some people call this grease-proof paper. Parchment paper is specifically for culinary purposes. I'll just show you that now. It's not wax paper, it's parchment paper, and it's meant to be able to be heated and you can cook in it. And we're going to have a really nice big stretch of this because we want it. There we go. We want this piece of parchment paper to be big enough to go all the way around the turkey. So this is the equivalent of putting a lid on it, but it's going to give us some space for the steam to come out the side, so we're not just stewing this turkey. So set that into our pan and put the turkey in on top of that. Come on, take the paper towel out because we don't want to be cooking that. This off to the side. And then move our turkey into place. So, now the next thing you want to do is to take care of your wings. If you leave your wing out like this, it's going to cook a lot faster than the rest of the turkey. So you're going to end up with this bit being all burnt. And so what you do with that is you take it and you kind of just twist it around in underneath, and then do the same on the other side. I can do this left-handed, for the left-handed turkey. There we go. And this is going to maybe kind of freak some people out who are thinking that nice roasted turkey is going to be low fat. But as I mentioned, we need to do whatever we can to keep that moisture in the bird. And one of the ways to do that is to put a layer of fat on the outside. And this is also going to help a lot with the browning process. So I have here about a cup of butter. It's half a pound. And there's no pretty way to do this. You're just going to grab hold of that, take this half a pound in your hands, and smear it all over the bird. And make sure you get it onto the tops of the legs, down here onto the wings. And now this is going to melt quite quickly, of course, in the oven, but we want to start with it up top. This will also mean that the parchment paper doesn't stick to the bird right off the top. Now, one thing you'll notice in the description underneath this video, I put a chart for roasting turkey, like how long it takes based on the size. But I only use the kind where it's called the slow roast method, which we start at we do it all at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason I don't do that, the other way to do it is to start with a very hot oven, about 425 degrees, cook it for a few minutes to sear, and then lower the temperature. It only saves you, on a bird this size, it's maybe going to save you 20 or 25 minutes in cooking time. But what will happen is between the butter and the paper and the wine that I'm going to add to this, when you have it in an oven that hot, it's disaster. And I know that from experience. There was one time when I accidentally decided to do that and I ended up poof out of my oven. Fortunately, I was able to salvage the turkey, but it could have been a real disaster. So keep it at that low temperature with this much fat and the parchment paper. So now my hands are kind of gooky. I've been dealing with this turkey. I'm going to wash up again. All right, so now hands are clean. We're ready for the next step, which is to roll up this parchment paper to create a seal. And parchment paper itself, and sorry this is going to be noisy, folks. But fold it over, and then if you have a stapler that you can staple both ends here and here, that's good to hold it in place. And if you don't have that, a paper clip might work, something that is metallic and isn't going to melt on you. But if you just let it go, it might unfold. It's not doing too bad here, but it might. If you don't have any of those, just make sure you crimp it really well, so kind of minimize how it's going to unfold. But this is, I see that it's open at the ends here, and that is going to give it the steam a spot to come out. It's also going to give you an opening where when you go to baste the turkey, you can get in there to baste the turkey. And speaking of basting, we need liquid to do this. And I prefer to use some white wine. And but if you don't want to use wine, you could use chicken stock or something like that. And the first rule when you're cooking with wines and with liquors is don't just say to yourself, oh, that's a really bad bottle of wine, but it's okay, I'll use it for cooking. If you wouldn't drink it, don't put it in your cooking. I mean, you're going to all this effort, don't put a poor quality product into your cooking. So I have this, my cook's glass, which has a quote from Julia Child on it, that she says, I enjoy cooking with wine. Sometimes I even put it in the food. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to just pour ourselves a little test. Okay, yes, that's perfectly good wine. So it doesn't have to be an expensive wine, just has to be good. This in particular one is a Pinot Grigio. So I'm just going to pour the rest of that bottle right in the pan. And this is going to be a great source of moisture for our turkey. And between that and the butter and the turkey juices is going to make the best gravy you've ever tasted in your life. So that's, you notice I haven't even put salt and pepper. You could add some salt and pepper, but we're certainly going to add that later on in the gravy itself. But that's about all we need to do. So now we're ready to pop it in the oven. And we're going to put our oven on to 325 degrees. Oh, shoot here. So now we're ready to put our turkey in the oven. We've got it set at 325 degrees. And I just want to show you inside the oven. Now, normally you've got 2 racks in your oven, and they're usually kind of about the middle. You'll notice that I've removed one altogether, and I've moved the other one to the very bottom setting. And this is something, of course, you want to do before you turn on your oven, because otherwise you're handling these pieces of metal when they're hot, and you have to find a place to put it and so on. But the reason we do that is because the turkey itself is going to be quite big. It's going to take up a lot of space. So if you just put this in the middle, it might fit, but the top of the turkey is going to be really close to that burner, and you're more likely to burn the top of it versus cooking it evenly throughout. So here we go. And we're just going to leave that there for about half an hour. And we're going to check on these, on the bird about every half hour to baste it, make sure that the wine hasn't all evaporated, and just check on how close it is to being done. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about how long we're going to cook this. So now that we've got a few minutes wait before the first time we have to baste that turkey, let's talk a little bit about how long we're going to cook this turkey. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, you need to plan ahead what time you want to start your dinner. So let's assume that you want to have dinner at 6 o'clock. In that case, we have to allow, first and foremost, at least a half an hour, preferably an hour to even 2 hours, to let this turkey rest after it's finished cooking. And what letting the turkey rest will do for it is allow it to reabsorb a lot of those juices. We will cover it up. It's not going to get cold. It's not going to be a problem, but you want a little bit of time to let it rest. So let's assume that we're going to take this out of the oven at 5 o'clock, for example. Then this particular turkey is going to take about 2.5 hours, which means that we needed to 4:30, 3:30, 2:30. 2:30 is about the time when you should be putting it in the oven. It's not like the olden days where you would put your turkey in at 5 in the morning and let it roast forever and ever and then fall apart. 2.5 hours should be plenty for this. If you want to err on the side of caution, you can put it in at 2 o'clock. Just let it rest for a little bit more. That's a really important thing to be remembering when you're planning your meal. The other thing with letting your turkey rest, it's the advantage to the cook, because that gives you that window where you're not scrambling to make all of your side dishes. And if you're smart, what you're going to do is you're going to say to all the people that are coming over for dinner, why don't you bring something? Well, if everybody's relying on you to cook the whole meal, the resting period for your turkey gives you a good hour window to cook all of your side dishes, which if you have them properly prepared and ready to pop into the oven or onto the stove, an hour should be a good window of time to do that. This time in between basting the turkey is also when you could be setting your table and getting everything else ready. And maybe once in a while, sitting down, visiting with your company, and having a sip of that wine if there's any left over from the turkey. All right, so now our turkey's been in the oven for about 45 minutes. It's time to check on it. So hopefully I'll have room here. Oh, look at the steam. There goes the glasses. And pull that out. We've still got lots of moisture in the bottom. And I'll pull it out just a hair so that you can see in there that it's not browned at all. It's changing, starting to change color, but not a lot. But the butter is very definitely melted. So we're going to take this little thing. It's called a baster. It's kind of got a suction cup on the end, or suction on the end, so it'll draw up the moisture. And you're just going to pull up a batch of that, and then I put it inside the, don't have a very good angle here. Inside the parchment paper, and again over the top. And like we say, we want to keep this as moist as we can, and including the wings and the legs, and then we'll turn it around so you can see the other end. There's a lovely little pool of butter in the bottom. There's going to be a delicious bit here. Okay, so we're on the right track for that. Back up again, keeping in mind that this is kind of hot. Slide it back in for another half an hour or so. Now, one other thing that I wanted to point out while we're sitting here at the stove is in this little pot here, I've been boiling up those giblets that we took out, and that's something that we can add either to the stuffing, or we can chop it up very finely to put in the gravy, depending on what your tastes are. But I've put it on the back burner there, and I have it on a very, very low heat. And one thing I wanted to mention was, if you're using a burner at the same time you're using your stove, get to know which one of the burners has the vent for the oven, because there's heat coming up here from the oven. So when I set the temperature on the burner, I always put it a little bit lower, so that it's taking into account the extra heat that's coming from the oven, and you're not boiling things over or overcooking them. And for that matter, you have to be careful if you think that you're setting something off to the side because you don't want it cooking here, but you put it over there, it's still getting heat from the oven. So keep that in mind. Get to know your stove very well as part of your cooking process here. So now we're about another 45 minutes long. Time to have another check on this turkey. And let's see where I splashed splashed it earlier. We're just going to open this up, and now we're starting to see a little bit of color. And again, we got lots of juice in the bottom. Let's get it back on top of this turkey, which is where we want it to be. And the same thing as what we did last time, just checking on it. Still a ways to go. But we don't want to neglect it. So, and there we go. Put it aside for another 45 minutes, maybe half an hour. We're about 2 hours into our turkey cooking at this point, and we're time to check on it again because things are getting close. As we expected with a turkey this size, it was going to take about 2.5 hours total. So let's have a quick peek here. And you can tell, so it's still kind of bland looking, but you can tell here where the meat is starting to come back on the bones. But if you touch it, it's quite crispy on the outside. And so things are starting to loosen up. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut back this parchment paper. I'm going to take all of it. I'm not going to worry about getting the stuff out of the bottom. What that's going to do is it's just going to expose it all, so now it can have a chance to brown up. And again, we're going to cover it up with a little bit of juice, and this is really important at this point because we won't have the parchment paper to self-baste it for us. And that skin on the legs is already fairly crispy, and you can see it bubbling up here and here on the breast, where we're just going to let that keep cooking just a little bit more, maybe a half hour away. At this point, we're going to check it a little more regularly, probably every 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to have a quick look at that. And then when it gets to the brownness that we want, we're going to put in our meat thermometer and just double check that everything is cooked properly. Okay? All right, so now we're pretty much at almost go time, but a couple of things we want to check first. First, we're going to pull it out. It's looking pretty good. Should maybe, if it's not quite done, I am going to turn it around. You see how one side of it's a little browner than the other? I think that's because we've had it in and out of the oven several times here. So the part that's closer to the back is going to be browner. It's looking pretty good from a perspective. See, we've got nice crispy skin here. We've got one thing you want to check is if your joints are loose. It's a little bit not quite as loose as I would like. But we're going to use a meat thermometer just to be really sure. And that you're going to stick it into the thigh here, being careful not to touch the bone. But that's the meatiest part of the bird. And if that says that it's done, and I think that's telling me that it's done, all right. And then the other thing is if you pull it out, if there's isn't any weird juice coming or dark colored juice coming out. So I think we're pretty much good to go here. Lift it out carefully. Again, this is a relatively small bird. When you've got a heavy bird, You got to be really careful with that. And then I'm just going to reach over here and get that rack that I had taken out earlier. And I'm going to put it back in the oven because this is where we're going to put all of our side dishes in right now while the turkey is resting. And we're going to put this dressing in. And we're going to put the Brussels sprouts in. And that will take about half an hour. And in the meantime, we'll start getting things ready for the next stage. So I have this carving board here, which has a couple of things in it. It's an unusual one in that it has this little ring in it, which has spikes in it. So when I put the turkey onto that, it's less likely to move around. If you don't have something like that, you may want to take an old dish towel, a clean old dish towel, but put it underneath the bird so it doesn't slide around when you're carving it. This board also has these ridges around the bottom because there is going to be a certain amount of juice that comes off of this bird once we set it to rest. So that will mean that we'll want a place for that to go instead of all over the counter. So that's what we're going to do. I also want you to take a note here at our wings. You can see how the bones are actually starting to come out at the joints. That's an indication that we're fairly well done in there as well. The same as with the bones on the legs. Because this wasn't a butter basted bird, and it's a smaller bird, it might not be quite as juicy looking from the outside as I would like. But it's done and I don't want to dry it out. So the next thing I have are these nifty little forks. They weren't expensive, but they're very handy if you have large things to lift. So that you can put, and you can hear that crackle in the skin when I put it in. And we're just going to lift this whole thing out. And there she is. So at this point, and I didn't bring any out, I'm going to take a little bit of aluminum foil, cover it up, put a towel over it, and just let it rest. And meanwhile, in this pan here, this is what we're going to make our gravy with. So now, in order for this to rest properly without drying out or cooling off unnecessarily, I'm just going to take a little bit of aluminum foil here and cover up the turkey. And then I'm going to take a couple of dish towels just for the insulating factor. I don't put the dish towels straight on there because that will stain them quite a bit. And then that's where we're going to let our turkey rest. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like and to share, and of course subscribe, and so that you're not missing out on any of our future episodes. One thing I should mention is before you, when you're done eating your turkey dinner, the easiest thing to do is just take this whole carcass, take off whatever meat you can, put it in the freezer, because in a couple of weeks' time we're going to learn how to make turkey and dumplings, and you're going to need that meat and the bones to make your stock, and I'll help you out through that process. So enjoy your Thanksgiving or your Christmas dinner, or for that matter, anytime you want to have turkey, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.